All right. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Very good evening, and thank you for being here. Today, I am going to talk about my personal journey as a doctor. How did I get into inventing medical devices? And that is in line with the overall subject today on innovations. But I would like to do this a little differently. I have a slide deck over here, but I hope to run through that just to give you a background context. But I would like to interact more and get your questions. I have the YouTube, comment section right in front of me. So what I would encourage is, as I'm going through my slides, it would be great if you could ask your questions so that I can address them towards the second half of the talk. And I think that's value for me because there's a lot you can understand about the ecosystem from the kind of questions that are posed to you. 12 years ago, when I started inventing devices, I had very different questions, and I'm seeing a lot of variety of questions now, and that teaches me about how well the ecosystem is developing. So I like to keep it interactive, and I hope I run through these slides in the next few minutes. This presentation is available on YouTube as well in a more humorous and comedy manner, given I'm a stand-up comedian. But today, in the interest of time, I'm going to be quite straightforward. So apologies for anyone who are expecting some jokes. Okay. So my name is Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi. I'm an ENT surgeon, and about say 17 years ago or 18 years ago is when I started doing my MBBS. And when I finished my MBBS training, which is from a small town called Tumkur in Karnataka, this is how my outpatient department looked like. And this is not even close to what I expected it to be. I thought it would be one patient at a time and I'll get enough time, but there were at least 100 or 150 patients at every given point of time, and really put me under a lot of pressure and challenge. And I could, on an average, spend maybe a minute or half a minute with each patient. And I used to think, why is it like this? We have one doctor for 1,700 people as per WHO. But then I realized most of these doctors are either in cities or they've gone abroad. But when you go slightly rural in different parts of India, this is a very common scenario of a lot of patients trying to get care. And this is where a lot of gaps are there. This is where a lot of standards are not met and quality of healthcare falls. Similarly, when I went into doing ENT from a premier hospital in Bangalore, in addition to these kind of volumes of cases that come in large hospitals, there is in addition, surgical rounds and, journal clubs and, research and presentations that adds a lot more of stress. And the more you do things, the more gaps you find out. And I found so many gaps that I wanted to solve, but I couldn't solve until one day I was going for a rural posting, where we go to a small town outside Bangalore to screen patients. And I was personally very bad at examining the throat using the laryngeal mirror. So we still use a thin, long probe. It's a mirror. We put it at the back of the throat. We shine a light onto it, and at that same time, we have to the patient's breathing, and it's fogging, and it's extremely difficult to see the vocal cords. And I think it's easier to see the moon on Karwa Chauth than to identify that during that, all reflection and all of that. And I was really bad at it, and I felt I was missing out on the diagnosis of many throat cancer patients, and that, I felt disturbed with. And I did something that most people would not do. Is I went and approached my boss one day, who was sitting at the hospital at the end of the OPD. His name is Dr. Ravi Nair. I also think I see him in the comment section. I don't know if it's the same Dr. Ravi Nair, but if that's you, sir, good evening. Long time. I still need to catch up. But he was my head of department, and I went to him saying that, sir, in our hospital, when somebody comes with a throat lesion, we use this three-chip camera, flat screen TV, and an endoscopy system, and to see the vocal cords in such a magnified view that you can pick early lesions. But many times patients come here so late that you can see the disease from outside. But where we need this kind of precision, where we need this kind of magnification, we are using age-old mirrors, which people like me struggle to use and are not able to catch up to it. And what we end up doing is we end up missing out the diagnosis. And that's when I think Dr. Ravi Nair, he pointed the fact that, I shouldn't be just barking about the problem. I should be doing something about it. And that's when I thought, maybe I should, do something about it. And being a medical student with a very small salary, we are blessed with Indian parents. So I told them that I have a project, and I managed to borrow 50,000 rupees from my father. And I had an idea at that point of time, and I jumped into the idea space because I felt that we already have endoscopes but it is tied to a large system. It's an expensive system of a light source, of a screen, and all of that. So I thought, why not take a camera instead and replace it with this large device, a large setup, and try to connect the endoscope to a digital camera and try to take the light source from the camera. And I got an engineer to make a prototype, and I was amazed that I could finally see what the vocal cords looked like, and I was also able to show the patients that this is the kind of disease you're having, and they were and the compliance that I started seeing after that was remarkable, because now patients usually don't believe in what a doctor is saying. They know these are young doctors, not experienced. But when I show them a video of this is a lesion, they can see that. They can see something red and angry, or they can see something white and strange, and now they know what to follow up with. So immediately we saw compliance, that people stopped smoking, following up more religiously, and started asking for the video examination. And I was very happy and went back to my boss and said, look, I'm onto something. And he was happy. But he said that, if you leave it like this and do not take this all the way to the market, then that's going to be a bigger crime. And then through his guidance, I formed a company, which nobody does during their training years, but I felt that we needed to take this ahead. It was the worst decision of my life, because as a doctor, we are never trained on how to invent or how to take a product, and we're just running from one place to the other. First, we went to a design shop. However good they are, they were very expensive, and for a doctor who earns 9,000 rupees a month, to pay 6 lakh rupees for a design was a whole different level of understanding of the industry. And then, paying for the engineering, mechanical design, and all of that. There's only so much I could afford. We struggled. My sister-in-law formed the company with me. Her husband was a business person. We took it to somewhat a refined prototype, and when we ran out of funds, I went back to Dr. Ravinar and said, "This is what I can do." And then he gave the suggestion that, if we doctors don't know how to invent, maybe we should learn how to invent. And he suggested I should look for courses and programs that could teach. And luckily at that point of time, there was this program called Stanford India Biodesign. But before that, what I did is I got selected into the program, but before that I sold the license of my device to the design firm, and they took it, and I went over to Stanford University, where there's run this program called Biodesign. Biodesign is one of the processes that has been leading for the development of medical devices in the Bay Area, which we in India import 75% of these devices at exorbitant prices. When I went to Stanford University through this program with a designer, engineer, and a scientist, there are a few learnings that I had, and which I would like to share with regards to innovations. Is in the biodesign process, the few things that I learned is a cross-disciplinary team works on an idea or an innovation. It's not one person's idea and then you try to build a team around it. Those seldom succeed. I'm not saying they don't, but there's a lot of struggle, because if it's your idea, automatically you have the first step, and then other people have to work on your idea, and they don't have the same level of passion or interest. What we learned in the biodesign process is you first create a team of an engineer, designer, doctor, so that all the cross-disciplinary expertises are met, and then you identify the idea together by spending 2 or 3 months in the hospital observing. Now, medical field is such that we deal with problems all the time. So when you ask a doctor what the problems he faces, he is likely to say that I'm not finding parking in the hospital, because problems for the doctor is not cases. Problems for the doctor is generally logistic and operational. Because if we don't have problems, we don't have a field. So if each patient comes with a disease, they come with an abnormality. It's our job to treat them. That's normal for us to treat them, to find gaps. So it's very hard when you go with this interview based approach. Tell us your gaps, what can we solve? It's very unlikely that they're going to say, when I use this surgical step, the artery folds. They're not going to get to that level of detail. At the most, they will say, our ECG device is not working. Please take a look at it. And that's why this observation approach, that too with an engineer, designer, and scientist, bridges the gap of the knowledge about the field, about the expertise, and you start picking up gaps, because you start seeing deaths, you start seeing mortality, excessive ICU stays, blood loss, and we start documenting them and figure out a scientific way to identify what's an unmet need worth solving. And once I understood that, create a team first, send them to the hospital space, observe, identify problems, and take a problem-based approach to solve. We came back to India, ran the program, and started developing numerous devices. The same device that I developed first, the ENT device, was licensed out to a company called Medtronic, and today it's called Shruti I Hear, and it has screened over 700,000 patients, and health workers use it. Similarly, we devised many devices, such as a liver biopsy device called Bioscope that you can see on the screen. Parasafe is an abdominal paracentesis device. We started teaching the program because the government funded us exorbitantly, and we wanted to teach this to more people. So we developed more devices through those, and they all started getting licensed out. But none of them were developed end to end, and that's why I exited from the program, came back to Bangalore, and was one of the founders of this company called Inaxcel, in where we started following the same biodesign principles, creating teams of engineers, designers, and doctors, and developing devices. All the 4 device images that you see there, Sinocare, which is a balloon sinoplasty device, Nozino is a nasal foreign body removal device, VapCare is a device that reduces ventilator-associated pneumonia, and SARS is a mechanical CPAP for infants during transportation when they have lung diseases. They're all commercial today in a span of 2 to 2.5 years because we've learned the entire ecosystem and the process of how to develop it. And then we started running fellowship programs to teach this. I run an online course now. If you're interested, I can talk to you offline. But we started teaching the biodesign process, and they started refining it to make it specific for our Indian setting. And eventually, Dr. Ravi Nair also said that, you should write this into a book. And I said, all I have is failures, because we hadn't really, how do you define success in medical devices, right? When it commercializes, when it creates impact. But he said something important, which I quote, is like, don't wait for successes to come to wait to write a book, because by the time you might get successful and write it, it may not even be relevant for that point of time. And you might just leave people inspired, but they may not be able to take any practical steps. So write about your failures. And I wrote about my failures called Inventing Medical Devices, a perspective from India. I realized people love to read about failures. They spend a lot of money to know about mistakes other people make. They feel good about themselves. The failure is a very good business model. If you fail, you can earn a lot of money, like me. And so then I wrote this book, but I didn't write it with a lot of interest because it was a book on failures. I didn't think people would read it, but this ended up being the bestseller in medical devices in India because there was no other book on inventing medical devices. And I started getting a lot of calls where people were saying, Jagdish, there are a lot of spelling mistakes in the book. It's not formatted properly. And then I realized, okay, people are reading it. So I republished it. And this is a photograph of me with Dr. Ravi Nair presenting the book to him. And that's kind of my journey of how I got into inventions. But most importantly, without having to leave my clinical practice, I'm a nose and sinus surgeon at Fortis Hospital, and I've continued to practice. This is a narcissistic image of me with the products that reach to the market. I've been involved with about 18 medical devices. About 9 have commercialized, and I have a 50% failure rate, which is considered quite good in the medical devices space. And while performing surgery, this is me using one of my own inventions, which is probably the proudest moment for any innovator, to identify a gap and develop a technology to use it. But life is stressful while inventing and being a doctor. So I'm also a stand-up comedian, and you can check out my videos on YouTube. Or you may have seen me on WhatsApp as the Corona guy, the doctor who sits in the car and talks like a disease. That is me. And if you want a more entertaining version of this story, we have released a web series called Starting Troubles, which talks about how the principles of inventions can be implemented by doctors. Happy to announce this is on Prime Video, Amazon Prime, but only in UK and USA. Make in India is not appreciated by Amazon India. But this is out there. You can watch it. There are ways to watch it in India as well through a VPN shortcut. And now, right now, I've taken an exit from all my medical devices companies, and I'm now providing services to other doctors and healthcare startups, because 12 years of inventing devices, we have partners all the way from idea to commercialization and scale. So I'm trying to help. HI is called Healthcare Innovations in Indian Healthcare. We wanted to call it HI, which is HI, but we didn't get the domain. So we kept adding I's and H's till we got a domain. And then we figured out an acronym for it called Healthcare and Innovations in Indian Healthcare. But long story short, what it does is it helps you find team members. A doctor can find an engineer, designer, scientist. That's a big roadblock, to find a team first. And once you find a team, you're not going to magically develop devices. So we provide reasonably priced services and training and teaching to doctors and healthcare companies to take them all the way forward. So these are my contact details if you want any further questions or any further discussions. I'm going to now jump into looking at some questions on the YouTube page, and I'd like to answer them. So let me see, what do we have over here? Somebody is asking me, how is ENT field working and coping with COVID-19 scenario, which has mouth as the main spread vector? Okay, I think with ENT, surgeries have taken a hit because this is a high viral load area, the nose and sinuses. But we are very active in emergencies, and we are active in propagating knowledge about COVID-19 and doing a lot of online consults, because I think majority of the mainstay of the management of COVID-19 is to stay at home and manage patients while they are at quarantine. But when they are not well and they require ventilator support, they need to be in the intensive care unit. So our role is largely in the initial stages, in the diagnosis and the management at home. So another question is, Jagdish, I've seen you as a comedian. When you did stand-up comedy for Service Now? Thank you. My question is around regulatory processes, especially approvals for devices. Well, yeah. So regulatory has always been a challenge for medical devices in India, but now we have the new regulations. They haven't been enforced yet. We have, I think, about 25 devices that are listed by the CDSCO to be regulated in India. They're largely catheters, implants, monitoring devices, and these devices need to go through the CDSCO process and the Drug Controller General of India's approval before you can market and sell in India. And I think they're going to be implemented. Some are going to be effective from the January 2021, and the remaining from April 2021. As of now, most of the devices that would fall under regulatory exempt or a class 1 CE can still be marketed and commercialized. But what we try to do in our inventions is that we always try to get at least one international certification, because we follow very rigorous documentation process, risk analysis. And I think documentation is the most important thing that early stage startups fail to do. But documenting how you found the need, all the way to how you found the solution and how you develop the proof of concept, prototyped it in testing, really strengthens your possibility of getting a CE approval, CE marking, which is a European conformity for regulations. And then when you do your clinical testing and other equivalent studies, the safety studies and feasibility studies, many times they're not required. You just have to prove equivalence with existing technologies. But if you're a novel device that does not exist, you may have to do some of these studies, and that's where it takes time. But it's always good to follow those documentations and processes, adhere to ISO standards that are applicable. For medical devices, it is ISO 13485, and different domains of these devices may have other ISOs and testing protocols. And with that, we can commercialize and launch. All right, so some good compliments over here. All right, thank you. Find the team first before seeing who finding it might take. Okay, let me see. Could you touch upon the services that you offer through High Platform to the doctors, and what do you feel about the growing market of teleconsultation in healthcare? I would like to talk about High offline, but briefly, I think we provide services anything from identifying the need, validating the need, getting clinical access to the team, doing the clinical testing, prototyping, product development, engineering, then also marketing, branding, sales to the both government and non-government platforms. But I'm happy to talk more offline, or our website www.hi.in has those details. Teleconsultation, I think, is growing because teleconsultation was really struggling. It was almost considered illegal, and I think it was defined as illegal for a while. But due to the pandemic, teleconsultation becomes the only way for doctors to interact with patients and healthcare professionals to interact with patients. So I think there is going to be this is the pandemic and its effects are here to stay for a couple of years at least as we improve. It's a complex disease and a complex treatment pathway. So teleconsultations are going to be there for a lot of the fields that you cannot go and see the patients directly. But it hits us surgeons because for surgeons, a lot of the things that we need to do are very, procedure oriented and surgery oriented. But a lot of the workup or the early assessment can be done fairly through teleconsultation, and then investigations such as CT scans and radiological investigations can balance for the lack of examination, so that we do. But to answer your question, I think it is a growing market, and I think there is a lot of scope for AI, machine learning, also remote procedures and remote diagnosis. And that may be a good way to build a lot of data and intelligence into these systems. So I definitely think that there's a lot of scope of innovations and direct use there. Uh, I think, I think I have another 2 minutes, if I'm not wrong. We'll take one more question. All right. I'll take one last question and we'll wrap up. Uh, in a corporate environment, people are often unable to work on innovation projects because of job responsibilities. Any tips? If you're employed by an organization, it's very difficult to invent because technically, whatever you do is owned by your primary organization. Second is you're paid and you have responsibilities, and it's very difficult to get flexibility of time. I took a decision very early on to move as a private consultant, not as an employee, but as a contract consultant. So I am not under any employee organization's contract, and I earn as much as I work. So that gives me a lot of flexibility on my time to focus on inventions, to focus on my practice, and at the same time to find time for stand-up comedy or authorship. But I think with that, I'm happy to take more questions offline. I think this has been, I know I've been rushing, but I wanted to cover as much as possible. So if I'm breathless, it is because of the speaking and not because of any other thing. So thank you very much, and I look forward to stay in touch with you offline. And stay healthy, stay safe. These are my contact details. Please feel free to reach out to me for any more information. And I thank you, and I sign out.